I never thought the worst day of my life would start with a cardboard box and my son-in-law's voice telling me I had 2 hours to get out. Let me back up. My name is not important right now. What's important is this. I'm 67 years old. I worked 31 years as a machinist at a plant outside of Columbus, Ohio. I raised my daughter Keely alone after her mother passed from cancer in 2009. Just the two of us in that house on Elmridge Drive for 14 years. I painted every room in that house myself. I fixed the porch stairs 3 times. I planted the garden out back because her mother loved marigolds and I couldn't bring myself to let it die just because she did. That house was mine, paid off. No mortgage, no liens, nothing, just mine. And then Keely brought home a man named Craig. I want to be fair. When I first met him, I thought he was decent enough. He had a firm handshake and looked me in the eye, which I always respected. He worked in commercial real estate, drove a nice truck, always had something confident to say. Keely was 34 and she hadn't had an easy time with relationships, and I could see she was happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. So I did what any father does. I told myself, give him a chance. They got married in the fall of 2022. Small ceremony, backyard of a friend's place down in Westerville. I wore the same navy suit I'd worn to my own wedding, and when I watched Keely walk toward him, I cried. I'm not ashamed of that. 6 months later, Craig lost his job. He told us the market had shifted. Too many deals falling through, his firm downsizing. He said it like it was a weather report, calm and explanatory, like none of it was his fault. Keely was working as a dental hygienist, pulling in decent money, but their apartment lease was running out and they were looking at a tight situation. I offered the spare room. Keely cried when I said it. She hugged me in the kitchen and said, "Dad, you don't have to do that." And I said what I meant. You're my daughter. Of course I do. That was my first mistake, not the kindness. The kindness was right. The mistake was not seeing who I was really inviting in. The first few months were fine. Craig helped with yard work occasionally. He was on his laptop most of the day, supposedly building out a new business venture in property management consulting, whatever that meant. I didn't ask too many questions. I gave him space. I figured a man needed to rebuild his confidence on his own timeline. But I started noticing things. Small things at first. He'd make comments at dinner about the house being underutilized. Said the square footage was wasted on just one person before they moved in. He'd walk through rooms like he was calculating something. Once, I came downstairs early in the morning and found him in the kitchen on the phone. And when he saw me, he ended the call fast and said he was just talking to a friend. I didn't think much of it at the time. Then he started talking about the neighborhood. "Russell, you know what this area is worth right now?" He never called me Dad, not once in 3 years. Always Russell. I had a buddy pull comps last week. Houses like this are moving for 450, 480 easy, some even higher if they're updated. I told him I wasn't interested in selling. "I'm just saying," he said, leaning back in my kitchen chair like it was his. "You're sitting on a gold mine here, and you're not doing anything with it." I said I was doing plenty with it. I was living in it. He laughed like I'd said something that was both cute and a little sad. Over the next few months, it escalated. He started involving Keely in the conversations. I'd hear them talking at night through the wall. Their room was right next to mine, and I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. Persuasive, persistent. And Keely, my daughter, she'd go quiet, and then eventually I'd hear her say something soft that I couldn't make out. One Sunday morning at breakfast, Keely sat down across from me and said, "Dad, Craig and I have been talking." I put down my coffee. "We think it might make sense to list the house," she said. "The market is really strong right now, and with what you'd get, you could move into one of those 55-plus communities out past Kahana. They're really nice, Dad. They have pools and social activities and everything's maintained for you." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I looked at Craig, who was standing in the doorway of the kitchen with his arms crossed, watching. "I'm 67, I said. "I'm not ready to go live in one of those places." "It's not a nursing home," Craig said quickly. "It's independent living, active seniors." "I didn't say nursing home. I said I'm not ready." He exhaled through his nose. Russell, I'm just trying to help you think practically here. This is my house, I said. I think pretty practically about it every day. That was October. By January, something had shifted. Keely stopped having breakfast with me most mornings. When she was home, she was distracted, on her phone, and when I tried to talk to her about anything other than small talk, she'd find a reason to leave the room. Craig had gotten a new consulting contract that he was very vague about, and he started having people over. Men in button-down shirts I didn't recognize, sitting in my living room with folders spread out on the coffee table I'd had for 20 years. I asked Keely who they were. She said, just some of Craig's work contacts. In my living room, I said. She looked at me with something I didn't recognize on her face, something tired and slightly guilty. Dad, please don't make this difficult. I didn't sleep well that night. In March, Craig came to me with a document. He set it on the kitchen table in front of me like he was presenting a business proposal. It was a listing agreement. My address was at the top. My name was typed into the seller line. I need you to think about this seriously, he said. He sat down across from me, forearms on the table, voice low and measured. Keely and I have an opportunity to invest in a property together if we can get the capital freed up. The timing is critical. If you sell now, you walk away with $450, maybe $500,000. You'd be set, Russell. You could travel. You could relax. I'm already relaxed, I said. You're being stubborn. I'm being a homeowner, I said, which I have a right to be. He stood up slowly. You know, Keely is really worried about you. We both are. You're getting older. Living alone in a big house? Well, you're not exactly alone, but look, at your age, accidents happen. What happens if you fall? What happens if you have a medical episode in the middle of the night and nobody's there? I looked up at him. Is that a threat? He spread his hands. Of course not. I'm talking about your well-being. But I saw it. I saw it clearly. I didn't sign the document. I folded it and slid it back across the table and told him I was done with the conversation. He left the kitchen without a word. That night I called my brother-in-law, my late wife's brother, who lives up in Akron. I told him what was happening. He said, change the locks. I said I couldn't change the locks with Keely living there. He said, then talk to a lawyer. I told him I'd think about it. I should have listened sooner. April came and things got worse fast. Craig started making comments in front of Keely about my memory. Little ones. Didn't you already tell us that story, Russell? Or he left the stove on again last night. Once, and I still feel the heat of it when I think about it. He said to Keely, right in front of me, I'm starting to wonder if he's still okay to live independently. Keely didn't defend me. She looked at the floor. I want you to understand what that does to a person. Not just the insult of it, but the specific cruelty of having your own child stand there and say nothing while someone questions your mind. I am sharp. I have always been sharp. I do the crossword in pen. I manage my own finances, my own medications, my own appointments. I have never left the stove on, but once someone plants that seed, especially in the mind of someone who loves you and is also afraid of something, it grows whether it's true or not. The day it all came apart was a Thursday in May. I came home from my morning walk, which I take every day, 45 minutes around the neighborhood. I came through the front door and Craig was standing in the living room with two men I'd never seen before. One of them had a camera. What's going on? I said. Craig turned around. His face was calm in a way that told me he'd been preparing for this moment. We're doing a walkthrough for the listing. Excuse me. The house is going on the market Friday, he said. I've already spoken to an agent. Keely and I agreed. I stood there in my own foyer with my jacket still on, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger exactly. Something older and colder than anger. Get these men out of my house, I said quietly. Russell. Now. The two men looked at Craig. He gave them some kind of signal, and they stepped out onto the porch. Then Craig turned back to me, and the calm on his face was gone. You're being irrational, he said. Keely has already signed off on this. The two of you are co-owners since you added her to the deed in 2019. That gives us legal standing to list. I've had an attorney look at it. I had added Keely to the deed. After her mother died, I wanted her to be protected. I never imagined she'd become a mechanism to take the house from me. "Where is my daughter?" I said. "She's at work. And honestly, Russell, this is going to be easier if she doesn't have to be here for this part." "This part," I repeated. He picked up a cardboard box from behind the couch and set it on the coffee table. "I packed some of your personal things from the bedroom, your watch collection, some books, your wife's photos. I thought it would be easier if you had somewhere to start." I looked at that box. I looked at the photos of my wife on top, her face looking up at me from a frame that used to sit on my nightstand. "You have 2 hours," he said. "I think that's generous." I would like to tell you that I said something powerful in that moment, that I stood my ground and delivered some kind of speech that shook him. But the truth is, I didn't say anything. I picked up the box. I walked out of my own house, and I sat in my car in the driveway, and I didn't move for a long time. I called my brother-in-law from the car. He said to come to Akron. He said, "Don't do anything until we talk to someone." I drove to the end of the street, and then I stopped because I couldn't see clearly. I was crying. I'm not too old or too proud to say that. I was 67 years old, and I had just been walked out of the house I'd lived in for 22 years, with a cardboard box and 2 hours' notice, and I sat at the end of Elmridge Drive, and I sobbed like I hadn't since my wife's funeral. But before I ever reached my brother-in-law's place in Akron, something happened. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. "Dad." It was Keely's voice. But something was different in it, something broken. "Dad, I need to tell you something." I pulled over. "I need you to come back," she said. "Not to the house, to the Panera on Henderson. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Please." I didn't say anything for a moment. "Are you okay?" "No," she said. "I'm really not." When I walked into that Panera, Keely was already in a booth in the back corner. Her eyes were red. She was gripping a coffee cup with both hands. When she saw me, she stood up and she hugged me, and she held on long enough that I knew something had happened. We sat down. She wouldn't look at me at first. "He's been stealing from me," she said finally. I waited. "I found out this morning. I have a savings account he didn't know about. I opened it before we got married, for emergencies, for my own peace of mind. I transferred money into it over the years without really telling him because I think I always knew that I needed something that was just mine." She stopped, swallowed. $62,000. I'd built it up to $62,000. I checked it this morning and there's 900 left. The world went very still. "He found the account number on a statement I left out 18 months ago," she said. "He moved it into a business account in his name and then moved it again into something I can't trace. I found the transfer records this morning while he was out. He doesn't know I know." I looked at my daughter, at the dark circles under her eyes that I'd been noticing for months and telling myself were just fatigue, at the way her hands were shaking slightly around that coffee cup. "Keely," I said slowly, "has he hurt you?" She shook her head. "Not physically. But Dad," she stopped again. I'm so sorry for what I let him do. To you, in your own home." I reached across the table and took her hands. "We're going to fix this," I said, "but we need to move fast, and we need to be smart." She nodded. Then she reached into her bag and slid something across the table to me. It was an envelope. "I've been keeping this for 2 years," she said, "since I started realizing who he really was. I recorded conversations on my phone. I know I told him I wasn't, but I was never. But I was scared and I kept them. Every time he talked about the house, about the money, about you, I transferred them to a thumb drive and I put it in that envelope." I opened the envelope. The drive was small, white, no bigger than my thumbnail. "There's also something else in there," Keely said quietly. I reached in again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt, a savings account receipt, in my name, from a bank I didn't recognize. "2 years ago," she said, "I opened an account for you, without telling you. I know it sounds strange, Dad, but I was trying to plan for something I didn't know how to name yet. Every month I put money in, whatever I could. I told myself if things ever got bad enough that you needed to leave, that you have something to start over with. I unfolded the receipt. The balance printed at the bottom was $58,400. I looked up at her. "It's yours," she said. Her eyes were filling again. "I should have done more. I should have protected you better from the beginning. I should have never let him." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I know I can't undo it, but I want you to have that. Whatever happens next, that's yours." I folded the receipt carefully and held it in both hands, and I looked at my daughter across that table in a Panera on Henderson Road in Columbus, Ohio, and I understood something. She had been scared. She had been manipulated by someone skilled at manipulation. Someone who had spent 3 years learning exactly how to isolate her from the people who loved her, while making her feel like she was the one making reasonable choices. That didn't excuse the silence. It didn't make the months of looking at the floor instead of standing up for me disappear. But I understood it. I had loved her mother for 31 years, and her mother had been the strongest person I ever knew. And I had watched even her get confused and uncertain when someone spoke to her with enough authority and enough repetition. Manipulation is patient. It works slowly. It rewrites things. "I'm not going anywhere," I told Keely, "and neither are you. Not without a fight." The next 72 hours moved fast. My brother-in-law drove down from Akron that same night. He had a buddy who was a real estate attorney, and she met with us the following morning at her office out in Dublin. We laid out everything: the deed, the transfer records from Keely's savings account, the thumb drive. The attorney listened without interrupting, and when we were done, she set down her pen and said, "He made some significant mistakes." "The recordings on that drive were not legally obtained evidence for criminal purposes," she explained, "but they were relevant to civil proceedings, and the financial transfers from Keely's account were clear and traceable. The pattern of behavior: attempting to coerce a listing, removing my belongings without consent, the comments about my mental capacity, built a picture." Craig was contacted by the attorney within 48 hours. I won't pretend he went quietly. He came back to the house the evening after he was served, and he stood on my porch and he shouted things I won't repeat here. The neighbors saw. He left when I told him calmly that I had already spoken to the Columbus Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and that any further contact should go through our attorney. He was arrested 11 days later. The Financial Crimes Unit found that Keely's savings account was only the beginning. He had done this before with a previous girlfriend. Same pattern: access to the finances, small transfers that became large transfers, then a plan to liquidate a major asset before disappearing. His prior girlfriend had been too embarrassed and too exhausted to pursue charges. Keely wasn't. The criminal case took 14 months. I won't walk you through all of it because, honest to God, most of it was paperwork and waiting. But I will tell you this: Craig was convicted on 2 counts of felony theft and 1 count of financial fraud. He was sentenced to 7 years. Keely's attorney also pursued civil recovery, and most of what he took from her was eventually traced and returned. The house stayed mine. I am still on Elmbridge Drive. The marigolds are back in the garden this year, actually. I put them in late because spring came slow, but they came up eventually. They always do. Keely moved into an apartment about 2 miles away. She comes for dinner on Sundays. She texted me last week a photo of a dog she's thinking about adopting, a beagle mix with 1 floppy ear, and asked what I thought. I texted back, "Get the dog." We don't talk about Craig much. When we do, it's practical, focused on the case or the recovery. There's still a gap between us, the kind that forms when someone you love doesn't protect you the way they should have, and we're both trying to figure out how to close it without pretending it isn't there. That kind of hurt doesn't vanish. It changes shape over time, and you learn to carry it differently. But you carry it. My brother-in-law asked me once, after everything was over, whether I was angry at Keely. I thought about it for a while before I answered. "I'm her father," I said, "and I've had 67 years to learn the difference between anger and grief. What I felt, what I still feel sometimes, that's grief. Grief that she was in something that dark and I didn't see it coming. Grief that she was so afraid of losing him that she lost herself instead. Grief that we lost a couple of years of Sunday dinners and easy mornings and all the small things that make up a life together. He nodded. But she came to that Panera, I said, when she had every reason to be too afraid or too ashamed. She came anyway, and she had that envelope ready, had been keeping it ready for 2 years. I shook my head a little. That's not nothing. That's someone fighting to find their way back. I keep the thumb drive in the drawer of my nightstand now, right next to the frame with my wife's photo, the one Craig had packed into that cardboard box. Some nights I look at it and I think about how close it came. The listing agreement typed with my name. The two men with the camera in my living room. My wife's face looking up at me from a box like something being thrown away. But here is what I know. People who mistake your kindness for weakness eventually overreach. They always do. They get impatient. They stop being careful. Craig thought I was just a tired old man with a nice house and nobody left to fight for him. He was wrong on all 3 counts. I'm not tired. I still walk 45 minutes every morning. I have a very nice house. And my daughter came back. That's enough. That's more than enough. And if you're out there tonight watching this and you've let someone move into your home, the place you built and paid for and filled with your life, and they've started making you feel like a guest in your own rooms, I want you to hear me clearly. Trust that feeling. Document everything. Talk to someone. Don't wait until there's a cardboard box on your coffee table. It's never too late to fight for what's yours, but the earlier you start, the less you have to recover. I still think about that cardboard box sometimes. My wife's photo sitting on top, face up, like she was looking at me. Craig had packed it without a second thought. 22 years of a life, folded into something you'd use to move cheap furniture. What strikes me most now isn't the cruelty of it. It's how gradual it was. There was no single morning I woke up and everything was different. It happened the way rust happens. Slowly, quietly, in the places you stop checking. And that's the thing about people who mean to take from you. They don't come at you all at once. They come in small moves. A comment here, a document there, a slow, patient rewriting of what's normal until you start to question your own perception of your own life. I let it go further than I should have because I wanted to believe the best. That's not weakness. I want to be clear about that. Choosing to trust people you love is not a character flaw, but there's a version of trust that dips into avoidance, and I was living in that version for longer than I want to admit. I saw the signs. I felt the unease every time Craig sat in my kitchen like it was already his. I just kept finding reasons not to name what I was seeing. That's the part I've had to sit with. What saved us? What saved Keely and me both? Wasn't luck. It was that she held on to her own judgment even when she'd been cut off from almost everyone who could have confirmed it. She opened that savings account before she could fully articulate why she needed it. She kept those recordings before she knew exactly what they'd be used for. That quiet, stubborn, private act of preparing for a worst case she hoped would never come. That was intelligence of the deepest kind. Not book smart, life smart, the kind that knows something is wrong before it can prove it. And the courage it took to make that phone call, to sit in that Panera booth and say, out loud, to her father, the person she had failed to protect, I'm so sorry. I know what that cost her. I know because I watched her hands shake around that coffee cup. It would have been easier to stay quiet, to let me drive to Arklawn and just let the whole thing fall apart from a distance. Instead, she called. That decision, that single act of choosing honesty over self-protection, is the reason we're still a family. I think about what I'd tell someone who's watching this from a situation that feels familiar. Maybe you have someone in your home right now who makes you feel like a guest in your own rooms. Maybe you've been dismissing that feeling because you love someone who loves them, or because you don't want conflict, or because you've talked yourself into believing you're overreacting. You're probably not overreacting. Document what you see. Talk to someone outside the situation. And understand this, doing right by the people you love sometimes means doing the hard thing early, before the cardboard box is already packed. The marigolds came back this year. A little late, but they came. Some things do.